Well, hello everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Morgan Malcolm and this is my channel, Love Where You Live. So let's get into today's video. As is properties, buying, selling, or why someone would want to buy or sell a property as is and how to do it correctly. And then we're going to go over some of the misconceptions about an as is property. So let's start off today with talking about what is a property that is being sold as is. What does that mean? So an as-is property just means that the seller and the buyer both agree that there will be no changes made to the property. You are buying it in the current condition without any changes being made to it. So basically, the seller will not be fixing anything and the buyer will not be asking for the seller to fix anything or compensation for it. So I'll talk a little bit more about some misconceptions on that part at the end of the video. But let's talk a little bit about why might a seller want to sell their property as is. So there's a couple of different reasons sellers end up selling a property as is or marketing it and trying to sell it as is. One of the big ones that we've been seeing a lot, especially here in Colorado, is that the sellers have purchased another property or have another place to live that's in another state, and they have already moved to that state before they've even tried to sell their other existing property. So now that they're not living here, it's a big inconvenience to try to fly back, figure out something, or remotely try to figure out repairs or changes to be made to the property. And it's just not an ideal situation to do that in, so they want to sell the property as is. So another one that could come up is going to be people that know of things that are wrong with the property. So if they have an idea that there is structural issues, if there's sewer line issues, any of those major high dollar value type things that are going to take quite a bit to repair and redo, a seller might say, you know what, I don't want to have to deal with that. I want to sell it as is and we'll let the buyer figure that part out. It is also sometimes in the buyer's best interest to be the one that does the work. A lot of the times when a seller's going to do it, they would want to do it the least expensive way possible, and that doesn't necessarily fit with what the buyer is expecting. So to have it be sold as is and let the buyer hire people that they want, get it to the level that they want, especially if it's like a furnace being replaced or a water heater being replaced. If you want something specific, it is better to take care of that yourself than to ask the seller to do it, because they're going to go, I can guarantee they will always go with the cheapest way to possibly do it. So what we would do in a case where there are known defects in the property, I advise my sellers to get at least 2, but hopefully 3 quotes on what it would take to repair that. And then we estimate what our value of the house would be where there's no issues. And we usually deduct whatever it's going to take to repair it from the purchase price. So someone's going to be buying it as is at a discount. We've taken in consideration whatever defects there are in the property, and we're listing it at an appealing value for that buyer to take on that by themselves. I always disclose whatever is known about the property because that is required. You have to actually disclose it. And I always like to put up the quotes as well so that the buyer really does feel comfortable that they can get it done with the discount that we've already taken off, and they're getting a good property and it'll be able to be taken care of after closing. But that's one of the reasons that people sell a property as is. So we have people that have moved out of state, also people that have rental properties and they don't live in the state that the rental property's in. They don't want to have to do that. So similar situation to living in a different state than the property they're selling. Known defects that they either are not comfortable with repairing or would prefer the buyer to repair, and it's better for a buyer to repair it. So they may sell the property as is. Another one that is going to be sold as is are any government-owned property. So if the government owns it, they absolutely will not make any repairs to the property. You are buying it however it is right now. It does not matter what you find on an inspection. They will not take care of any of those things. Those are usually at a discounted price, but not always, and you never know what you're going to find with those. So government-owned properties, REOs, and HUD properties going to be sold as is. Similar things, so different situations where the sellers will be motivated to sell a property as is. Things like a divorce, foreclosure, bankruptcy, anything where the sellers do not have funds to fix anything. So if they're in a bankruptcy or it's a short sale, that means they're struggling financially and they don't have any extra money to pay for the house, so they don't have any extra money to put into the house to even get it sold. So those we tend to sell as is. Now, that's the seller side of it, but there's also an option for a buyer to initiate a sale for as is. And why would a buyer want to do this? Well, I can think of two very clear situations. There's obviously many others, but one would be, so let's say you're a regular home buyer, you're buying the house to live in yourself, and you're in a multiple offer situation. So this has been happening a lot lately where we get multiple bids on properties. So the first thing that usually happens is we up the price and we overbid what the asking price is. Well, that can only work to a certain point, because if you're getting a loan, you have to get the property to appraise. If it is a smart agent on the other side, they will kind of tap out how high people are going over the listing price, because at a certain point it's not going to happen. An appraiser is not going to appraise the house for $80,000 over what all the comps and all the market data says it's worth. So at a certain point, we're going to stop increasing the price and try to strengthen our offer in other ways. One of those ways is to purchase the property as is. Now, this is something that definitely has some risk to it, and if you're a first-time home buyer, you may or may not be comfortable with doing that. I'm going to go over some of the reasons and misconceptions that people have about buying an as-is property in just a few minutes, so it's going to be at the end. But it's not as risky as some people think it is. So one way to strengthen your offer, to buy it as is. So the other one I can think of where a buyer would initiate an as-is sale is if they are an investor or have some type of trade experience of some sort. So almost all of my investors have pretty much no deadlines in their offers. When they want to buy something, they plan on buying it. And one of the big ones that we take out is the inspection stuff, meaning they're going to buy it as is. Why we do that is because as an investor, they're going to be renovating the property. So what's wrong with it is slightly irrelevant, because they're going to, one, tear down everything and replace it anyway. But they're also usually going in low. So we want to go in low and say we're buying it as is. You won't have to make any repairs. This is why you want to go with this investor. So investors and competing with other offers are two reasons why I think a buyer would initiate an as-is deal. So for why a buyer would initiate an as-is deal, I can see it being buyers that are competing and investors or people that have a trade experience. So if you're an experienced electrician, plumber, roofer, these things don't bother you and you have the ability to repair them, that might be something where you can go in a little lower than some other offers and buy it as is, and that's how you negotiate that. So what are some misconceptions about as-is properties? I think one of the biggest ones that I hear a lot is that there's something majorly wrong with the property. That's why they're selling it as is. And if you watch the video up until now, you know that's not always the case. There are some properties where there are known defects, and if the seller and the agent are doing things correctly, they should have already disclosed what those are, but you can still do your inspection and find out anything about the property. So having it be that there are major issues with it, it doesn't always become that. There are people who are really comfortable with cosmetic updates where they were planning on redoing the kitchen or repainting things, or they'd want to have a specific floor down so they don't care that the carpet's damaged or anything like that. So some people have a more higher tolerance for some of the things that maybe someone else thinks is a deal breaker. So some as-is properties could have major defects, but it doesn't always mean they have major defects, especially things like the government-owned ones. They just absolutely sell everything as is, so you never know what you're going to get with those. I think the second largest misconception about buying a property as is that the buyer doesn't get to do an inspection. That is completely incorrect. You get to do an inspection. That is your right as a buyer. You can do it whatever you want. You don't have to do an inspection, but you do have the right to still do one, even if you're buying the house as is. What as is means is after you've done your inspection, you don't get to ask the seller to repair anything based on what you find in the inspection. you have the right to either cancel the contract and back out or move forward with all of the known defects that you have. So that's still something you get to do. Sellers need to understand that buyers still get to do that, and they can still cancel the contract even though they're saying they're buying it as is. It doesn't force them to move forward even if they find defects that they're not comfortable with. So let's say you go into a property and there is 3 major items wrong with it where you're only expecting 1. Well, that now may be too many things for you to take as is, and you're going to go ahead and cancel the contract and find something else. So that is misconception number 2. All right, so the third issue that a lot of people run into with as-is properties is the agents are either not familiar or not comfortable with writing an as-is offer correctly. So in Colorado, it is already written into our contract that buyers are purchasing the property as is. Most people don't know this, but it's in section 10.2 towards the bottom, and I'll put that up now of what it actually says. But in the bottom of that section, it says, buyer acknowledges that seller is conveying the property to buyer in an as-is condition, whereas and with all faults. So as a buyer, you are purchasing the property technically as is. It is also written into our contract, though, that you can do an inspection, and if you've written the contract how it normally goes traditionally, you can ask the seller to repair anything. So what happens if you do want to make sure this is written as is, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side? So in our dates and deadlines, section 10.3, there is an inspection objection, an inspection termination, and an inspection resolution. To truly buy a property as is, 2 of those deadlines need to be written as NA, so they are no longer applicable. And that would be the inspection objection and inspection resolution. The only one that should remain is a termination, an inspection termination date. So this means that the buyer still has the right to terminate based on inspection items, but they do not have the right to ask for anything, which would be the objection, and the seller does not have to fix anything, which would be the inspection resolution. Those 2 being removed means the buyer is truly buying the property as is. Now, as an agent, you no longer need to write anything in additional provisions saying it's as is. That's what that clause that's in 10.2 is, and that's why you're taking out those 2 objection deadlines in the dates and deadlines. We can see that it is being written as is. So if I have a seller and they truly want to sell their property as is, the first thing I'm going to do is look at those dates and deadlines and make sure they've taken those 2 out, that they only have that termination filled in. And we'd usually want to do that pretty quickly, because if they're going to terminate, I don't want to have it off the market for very long. So what can you do if someone writes an incorrect contract? Well, as always, you can counter it. And that would be one of the big things I would counter out, is any of those deadlines that they put in that they shouldn't. If they really want to buy it as is, let's make sure we all are in agreement this is happening correctly, and you take out those deadlines. On that same note, if I have a listing that they want to sell as is, I am disclosing that in as many places as possible in the listing. I do not want to waste the seller's time, my time, buyer's time, their agent's time, by misinforming them that there's a chance that the seller will fix anything. I'm going to put it in public remarks, in broker remarks, this property is being conveyed as is. I will also put in the broker remarks, which goes to the agent, that we were expecting to not have those deadlines. In the offer, please only put in a termination deadline so that this is an as-is property. This way, it is very clear. It is written all over the place. We're doing this as is. If there are any reports or any information about the issues that are known about the property, I will also write in there, please see attachments or resources for any bids or known defects of the property. We might also put in there the seller's property disclosure, which discloses anything known about the property and issues. Again, we just want to give everyone a fair chance and all of the knowledge that we have about what's going on with this property, so they can either rule it out or really want to move forward with it. All right, so that sums up buying and selling a property as is. I hope that helps get some misconceptions kind of answered and cleared up. Buying and selling a property as is does not necessarily mean you're buying a distressed property or something with issues, but it is a great tool to help you either strengthen an offer, add in negotiation, or if you want to sell a property and you just don't want to do any of those repairs or have any of that, selling it as is a great option. So if you are looking to do this, make sure the agent that you have chosen knows all about it and is very well informed at the beginning about your intentions of selling or buying as is, and make sure that they know how to look for a contract or counter a contract to make sure that your interests are being met and that you're protected on either side of it. So make sure you just have a professional and you should be great with this process. If you do have any further questions, please feel free to leave comments below, message me, get a hold of me on any of my other social media. I'll have information listed below. If you haven't subscribed yet, please go ahead and hit subscribe and click that notification bell. And I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time. All right, bye.